In her 2018 book, The Opposite of Hate, Sally Kohn takes readers on an insightful and funny discovery of how we as humans can harbor so much hate, and how we can overcome our differences and our disagreements and find common ground. She released that book 2 years ago, so I'd honestly like to know if she still thinks it's possible. I'm Clay Aiken, and this episode is Politicon's final How the Heck episode under the Trump presidency. Yes, a milestone for sure, the final episode under the Trump presidency. Let's just let that sink in. But while the end of this administration may make many people happy, it certainly caused a great deal of upset for many other Americans as well. So as we look towards a new beginning under a President Joe Biden, if we don't attempt to make the same efforts to understand and empathize with our political opposites in the same way that Sally Kohn endeavored during her years as a writer, activist, commentator for both Fox News and CNN, we may find that the vision in our country doesn't really change that much under a Biden administration either. So, Sally Kohn, after the rhetoric on display from President Trump and his allies in the months since the election, do you still feel there are ways to heal division in the country through discussion and empathy? Do the events at the Capitol on January 6th represent a rock-bottom inflection point? How should Joe Biden best respond to Donald Trump and his supporters in order to heal the nation's divide? And holy crap, how the heck are we going to get along?
You know, look at the world with a gimlet eye, although to be honest, I don't know what a gimlet eye is, but a gimlet sounds really great right about now.
That's what people need.
No, look, there's a more realistic and then there's a more sort of pessimistic way of looking at that, right? One is, ironically, even though, people from both sides finding ways to talk and learn and grow from each other. And frankly, that's not to be both sidesist about this in any way, shape, or form, but like to not write off half the country, but find a way to transform half that country and bring it along into a future that is not only more democratic and pluralistic and multiracial, but is also, by the way, better for them and their own personal and financial interests and health and well-being. And they're certainly the future of their children as well. So but like, we can't do it, right? And it's become, even just suggesting that is a goal or, has become toxic. But also, that's also a realistic reflection of the fact that, as taboo or touchy a conversation as that might have been 8 years ago, 12 years ago, even 4 or 2 years ago, it's just, we've gone off the deep end. We really have gone off the deep end.
Well, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you this week is because I am not necessarily on a policy front a moderate. I think I'm pretty damn progressive, but I get mistaken for a moderate a lot. Not because my accent. No, maybe that's it. Yeah, people think I'm a country singer too.
100% the accent. Don't you know
but
that?
I didn't even know I had one. But I get mistaken for moderate a lot because I am willing to say I'm willing to like Republicans. I'm willing to be friends with people who I disagree with, and I have found over the past year or so, there are not that many guests who we've had on this show who are that good at that. And you're one of the only people who I can think of in the media world who I think has been, maybe you and Van Jones also, who are good at recognizing that even though I may completely disagree with someone else, I try to have empathy for their position and try your best. I think, I've watched you for a while, try your best to see the other side. But were you able to do that on January 6th?
Okay. Well, first of all, it's interesting you're singling out Van and I, because we both kind of come from a similar background in community organizing and having spent time working with people with whom you may agree on one issue or 10 issues or 5 issues. But, when you meet people up close, you realize how much more complicated politics really is. And also you realize that people are, as Brene Brown says, hard to hate up close, right? But exactly. Then I also joined the media at a time when look, I mean, we could go back, and I certainly can be self-reflective and self-critical in this regard, that, cable news inherently feeds this kind of hyper-partisan intensity.
You don't
But
say.
Certainly when Van and I stepped into that space, it was not what it is now. And it's just worth noting that there's a sort of a self-selection or sort of self-fulfilling nature to pundits today, right? Where the ones who are more likely to be hyperpartisan are the ones who are more likely to get booked,
right,
succeed, find traction online, etc. So I don't think those things are super unrelated. Look, I come by it honestly because when push comes to shove, and as hard as I can find many of the views of folks on the right, hard, very hard. That's an understatement. I try to remember that other people don't get to define my principles and values for me. And my principles and values are that all people are equal and deserve equal humanity and respect. And if I really, really, really actually believe that, and for instance, believe that they should treat me with respect, even if they don't agree with my choices or beliefs or identity, then I have to, unless I'm a hypocrite, I have to live up to that standard myself. And, again, it doesn't mean I like what everyone believes. I like what they think. I like what they say. It doesn't mean that at all. But it does mean, finding and respecting, appreciating, and trying to keep in mind the essential humanity of all people. And by the way, also, and this is, I think, really, really hard. This has gotten harder since last week, but try to believe that most people are fundamentally good, that people want to do good.
I think that too, but are we naive?
Well, here's the thing is people like me have said, look, for 50 years, we've had a Republican Party and a far right that has systematically stoked racial resentment, hatred, and increasingly, conspiracies, factlessness, right? And we've said, like, look what's going to happen. And it happened. And you can't then also say that mindset, those beliefs inhere in those people, right? They are if we believe in systems and how systems shape people, then we have to believe it on the left and on the right. And that people are products of systems. When I look at the woman who was shot by Capitol Police, it is impossible. I mean, listen, she was obviously, there's some videos of her saying some pretty cuckoo bananas things. Those cuckoo banana things didn't come from her brain. They came from Fox News and Newsmax and Alex Jones. But also, it is impossible for me to separate the fact that, her military service and what I and others have talked about for years as the danger of, a imperialistic military that systematically dehumanizes others, and in it, so doing also dehumanizes the people who serve. And the way that we use, especially poor people, poor white and people of color in this country, as tools of our military for, our imperialist and economic elite motives. So I can't disentangle all of that and just say, oh, bad person, good person. It's just, if you really are progressive, I think you have to recognize it's more complicated than that.
Well, isn't that part of the problem, that we don't have the attention span right now to recognize that things take a second longer to think about than, 180 characters? I mean,
isn't it 260 now? But yes.
Right. Well, in 260, you can explain it all. I'm sorry.
You can see the leap forward in our discourse, right?
Well, thankfully. I mean, but I mean, the people who stormed the Capitol, what I think was most really kind of eye-opening to me was how unashamed, how proud they were, how brazen, not just brazen, because obviously they were brazen, but, live streaming it, videotaping it, taking pictures, posing so proudly for news photographers inside the Capitol building. These were people who also thought that they were right. And the things that we say on the left about, how Republicans have been. I've talked to some strong Trump supporters in my own circle, even in the last week, and have been somewhat shocked by how much they truly still believe that not only was the election stolen, but that Democrats have been trying to ruin the country also. So if it's that bad, and if it's not just people having differences of opinion, but people now so just deeply believing things that are not true, how is there a way to fix that? I mean, do you think Joe Biden will be the antidote to that? What do you think is going to fix it?
No, I don't think Joe Biden. I mean, I don't think Joe Biden is a singular antidote. Nor do I think 1 year, one presidential cycle, I mean, listen, it is, when people talk about this, they say correctly, that Trump is a symptom of a deeper set of realities. And again, we could draw back to 50 years of Republican Party strategy since Goldwater to stoke white racial resentment and fear in order to win elections and promote policies on the extreme right. But we could go back to, 1619.
Do you really think he's a symptom? Do you really think he's only a symptom?
He is unique, right, as a historical figure, but he is not unique in the trends and trajectories that he exploited and built upon.
Okay, now that I can totally agree with you on that, but I mean, I have heard he's a symptom more so than the catalyst. But some of the things that I hear, I grew up in I grew up with a Republican family. Everybody around me my sister-in-law and I are the only two people in the family who didn't vote for Trump. But I have never in my life heard some of the brazen things from people in my circle, community, family that I have heard since the last 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency. So while I think that certainly he was a symptom and a product of some deep-seated resentment or fear that the country was being taken in the wrong direction, some of the stuff that I hear now wasn't around until he got here. And I'm not convinced that it was always there. I think that's, like believing the election was stolen, believing that elections were rigged. This is not something that I believe has really been a concern in Americans' minds in 50 years. Even when Bill Clinton beat Bob Dole and my parents weren't happy, they didn't think it was stolen. They just thought all the people who voted for Clinton were stupid, So there is a little bit of Trump that's very original, don't you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, right. But again, here's an example where Trump is building on and exploiting this one example, and there are obviously more examples of this in his record and his rhetoric, where he's building on exploiting, certainly not maybe we got to the point of talking about the entirety of the election, but the mythology of voter fraud, the outsized mythology of voter fraud, and frankly, the fraud of voter fraud, it was around well before him. The notion of illegitimate presidents was around well before him. I mean, remember, apart from the obvious birtherism that Trump himself played a key role in, don't forget the rhetoric around Barack Obama's election that these were quote unquote low information voters and they were given free cell phones, and right, like it's not this and then on top of that,
but it never really was. So it was he's not qualified to be president. He's not Obama. Well, he's not legitimately allowed to be president because he was born in Kenya. Like all these things, but nobody said that the ballot boxes were stuffed, did they?
Yeah. Oh, there were things about dogs voting and dead people voting. Oh. And, yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, that's where some of these, that's where some of the Republican that's where Republicans use their excuses. They created
Trump
their own mythology of voter fraud
to
roll back voting rights. This is why Republicans have been, for instance, passing laws for, years in states, state by state, to try to stop people from, quote unquote, bundling voter registrations, right? Because of this So it's part of what is true. And this is where he is singular in history, is that it wasn't until now you had a national political figure, let alone the leader of a political party, let alone the president, endorsing, stoking, fanning all of these things. I mean, we could go back though. Even then, let's go back to Pat Buchanan. I mean, this is not.
Let's
right?
not, please.
But you know what I mean. Like, in other words,
you're right.
We could go back to Goldwater. We could go back to Nixon. We could look at like this wasn't. Again, it is singularly unique. This goes back to that point about being able to be, not surprised but shocked. Right? We could recognize that he is singularly awful and in his way unique, while also recognizing the patterns and systems that he built upon.
So when you don't have any free time and you can't read or work on personal development, and it can be really hard to find time to sit down and read and learn more about the things that interest you, especially when you got so many incredible podcasts like this one to listen to. So let me tell you about a secret weapon for learning new things and getting ahead. It's an app, and it solves the problem for you. And I really highly recommend it. It's called Blinkist. And Blinkist is really unique. It works on your phone, your tablet, your web browser, all that stuff. It takes the best key takeaways, like the really need to know information from thousands of nonfiction books, and condenses them down into just 15 minutes that you can read or listen to. Remember Cliff's Notes when you were in school and you didn't want to have to read the whole book? Blinkist has done that with thousands of nonfiction books and sort of given you the most important information, and you can listen to it too. It's made for busy and successful people like you who want to get the main points of a book really quickly, so you can start using that information right away and impressing people at dinner parties whenever we're allowed to have those again. Blinkist has its audio feature, and so it's easy to finish a book anywhere, anytime. 12 million people are using Blinkist right now, and it has a massive growing library, everything from self-help to business to health and history, along with the latest titles from the bestseller list and classic nonfiction titles you always, meant to read, but never really wanted to. Most of the books from our guests here on How the Heck Are We Going to Get Along are available in some way, some form or fashion on Blinkist. You should definitely check those out. Also, they've got, I'm not going to say directly that I haven't necessarily read all of them and have instead used Blinkist, but maybe some of them. They've got really great books up there. Upheaval, Turning Points for a Nation in Crisis by Jared Diamond and United by Cory Booker are up there right now. With Blinkist, you get an unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books, all the books you want, all for one low price. Right now, for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/guess what? Heck to try it for free for 7 days and save 25% off your new subscription. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist. That's Blinkist.com/heck. to start your free 7-day trial. And you'll also save 25% off, but only when you sign up at Blinkist.com/heck. And we thank them for sponsoring the podcast. So what does it say to you that people like Mitch McConnell, okay, end of list, really spoke, or Liz Cheney this week, spoke out against Trump finally. I know Mitch McConnell has not decided which way he'll vote, but Liz Cheney, certainly no moderate herself, certainly not from a moderate family herself, voted to impeach the president in the House. Mitch McConnell has not said which way he thinks he'll vote, and this is not a man who has ever been shy about his opinion before. Is the Republican Party seeing the error of their ways from supporting him, or do you think they're just seeing that he's weakened and therefore they don't need to support him anymore? What's going on in that whole Republican situation, do you think?
I mean, if I understood Mitch McConnell, you don't want me to finish that sentence.
but they're I mean,
No,
he
no,
may be. You have to assume at least that Mitch McConnell he must be pleased with the fact that his former colleague, Joe Biden, is now going to be president. And I mean, CNN reported today that they actually speak to each other more often than you would think, and that they may be able to get some things done. Do you think Mitch McConnell is just done with Donald Trump, or is the Republican Party done with him?
Someone said, political power is to Mitch McConnell as oxygen is to the rest of us. So, Mitch McConnell has many faults.
You don't say.
I'd be happy to list them sometime.
We don't have much time.
He is masterful in his capacity to hold on to power and his capacity to hold his, certainly his caucus together and get done what he wants to get done. So I think, and I have to believe that, I think very credible reporting on this, both by credible journalists and also because I think it squares that Mitch McConnell all along, figured he was making a devil's bargain with Trump. He didn't like him. He didn't want him. No, I mean, let's be clear. Let's look at Lindsey Graham. Let's look at all of them. None of them wanted Donald Trump to be president. They didn't. They were as against him. I'm not quite as against him, but you know what I mean? In the primaries and so forth, they saw him as, and especially, by the way, and there's some of this that we could also look askance at, they saw him as this sort of crass, unelite, dangerous. They couldn't control him. Was it that? I don't think they really cared that he was, attacking Mexicans and so forth. That part, I don't think they gave two craps about. Now, Mitch McConnell, however, sucked it up because he saw that his party, the Republican Party, was increasingly becoming Donald Trump's party, and saw, and this is, I think, very clear. I'd like to think that if, they had been able to vote blindly without transparency, that more, I pray that more House Republicans would have actually voted to impeach. But I think they do genuinely not only fear for their political futures, but probably fear for their families because they know they and their families will be threatened. So, I think the minute that Mitch McConnell thought he could get rid of Trump without repercussion, and even then he's hedging, right? He's not saying he supports it. He's just saying you should let it happen. And all evidence points to the fact that that's because corporate donors are backing away from Republican Party and Republican candidates. And Mitch McConnell's power stems directly from his ability to funnel money to candidates into his caucus. And so he now, I think that's it. The money is its own party, as they say.
I read a hypothetical on Twitter yesterday, that has just totally stuck in my head and has fascinated me as a hypothetical sense, that if Joe Biden were to discuss with Mitch McConnell and make a bargain of some sort with at least 17 Republicans, that Biden would agree to pardon Trump for federal crimes in exchange for 17 Republicans joining to convict him in the Senate. I know that's hypothetical, but it was discussed. I read it on Twitter yesterday, and then I think it was discussed on Michael Smerconish today. How would you feel about something like that?
I've studied, the worst of post-genocidal nations that truly were, that didn't just come close to the
you went to
brink,
Rwanda for your last book,
right? And in countries like Rwanda, in South Africa, in countries that have really been truly torn asunder by the type of hate, stoking of hatred that we've seen throughout this administration, and certainly saw come to a head on January 6th, the path forward that has proven time and time again to be the only workable solution has been the process coined as truth and reconciliation. And the important part of that I think that we leave behind when we sort of say them together. We say truth and reconciliation is the sequencing of them.
Okay.
Right. And by the way, this puts aside for a second that I think, that, he should be impeached, even if the trial goes on after. It is important to impeach him, both because it shows we actually give a damn about our nation and our nation's security. And it stops him from being president again.
Well, and you have to make sure that. At least you have to make sure that some president in the future doesn't say, "Oh, well, I've only got 4 weeks left, so I might as well bomb Denver." So because they're not going to do anything,
think
right?
All of this makes me, every time I think, remember when Obama, there was a red line in Syria and he didn't, anyway. So the other point is truth and reconciliation. There has to be accountability. There has to be an honest reckoning with what actually happened. And what was done, what was committed, before we can get to healing, before we can get to unity, before we can get to learning.
But truth,
right? One comes
truth is
the
written.
Other.
Truth is written by these various disparate media outlets now, isn't it? And I mean, this person who I spoke to the other day about this, that just sort of made me scratch my head and think, what world am I living in? This person, I noticed, had a Newsmax app on their TV, and I was like, well, there's your answer. I mean, that's where they get their news from. So truth is coming.
Let's not call it news, shall we?
I mean, let me ask that. Is freedom of the press a dangerous right that we have? Should there be some law that says you can't use the word news unless it's accurate? I mean, is this freedom of the press, which obviously I'm being facetious. I'm not suggesting we not have it, but should we put some limits to, what can be called news if it's not true?
There are, that is an outstanding point. And that really is.
Well, it's a question. I don't know if it's even possible.
No, but I mean, there are certain parts of this which are easy. And by easy, I don't mean, easy necessarily to do, but it's kind of easy from a not just a moral perspective, but an action perspective, right? Like, it's very clear, people who violently stormed the Capitol should be held accountable. People who incited violent attacks on the Capitol should be held accountable. We should move forward where our leaders are talking compassionately and persuasively and positively about the idea of a equitable and just and multiracial democracy. So these sorts of things, like, I'm not saying it's going to be easy to get there, but we can kind of see where that goes.
But if we can say that Trump is, I mean, I know you're about to answer this, so I'm going to add another question to it.
Right.
If Trump incited the riot,
complicated.
If Trump incited the riot, then can't we also say, well, OANN, Newsmax, Alex Jones, they also incited it? I mean, they were saying the same things, right? And telling people it were true.
And this is partly how they insulate each other, and partly how it becomes complicated. And then, of course, you put social media into it, right? So it is not going to be easy to untangle. It is not going to be simple to figure out how you, in effect, and I can't, it's late, so I can't think of a better phrase for this, and this is probably completely the wrong phrase, but put your thumb on the scale of fact and truth, at least in such a way that there is some arbiter, some sense that people can reliably know that is fact and that is truth, while not making people feel squelched or silenced. Because there is a reality. I mean, this is testing the core principles of our nation, where we always believed that sunlight was the best disinfectant, and the answer to bad speech was more speech. And now we have to wonder, is that true? Is that true when you don't have experts? Is that true when, going back to earlier in our conversation, everything has become the opinionification of media? We used to just have reporting. It was about facts. Here are the facts. And you, the consumer, decide
now
what
we
to
have
think.
now we have
opinion as
opinions
fact.
marauding as facts, though. I mean, some of these things
and
that
we have-
Alex
but we also
Jones
have-
says are they're facts. They're just, I mean, it can't help but wonder as I'm doing yard work today in our balmy, sunny, 52-degree weather.
All right, that's not nice. You don't have to do that.
It was 52.
I'm already having a hard enough day, like fighting with the insurance company.
Is it that bad where you are?
This.
Listen, 52
like,
is the best day. Is the best day we've had here.
I'm hanging up. Forget this. Go ahead.
But as I'm working in the yard, I always have my best thoughts when I'm doing something like that. And I think, is it going to come down to, if the government can't censor speech, obviously, and they shouldn't, and the government can't tell news and press organizations what to say, is it going to come down to someone suing Newsmax or Alex Jones for libel, or someone suing them, the family of the slain police officer at Capitol Hill, suing them for inciting violence against their family member, the death of their family member? What is going to govern this stuff? Because I don't know how you govern it with a First Amendment right to freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Those two things pretty much allow you to say anything that you want to, say it's a fact and doesn't matter, right?
I think a couple of things. First of all, there obviously have been suits like that against Alex Jones and others, and I think that those are impactful. I do think platforms having clear lines and enforcing them when they're crossed is also important. But those are case-by-case situations. As for the larger dynamics at play here, ultimately, I think we have done a poor job. And this doesn't answer the whole thing. But what is true is there needs to be some mechanism in platforms and social media, the way most people get their information right now, which lets people distinguish between fact and opinion, and distinguishes news sources. And you're starting to see some movement of that. When you go to retweet an article right now, it asks if you first want to read the article. It points out if what the tweet says has been contended by news reports. And so we're moving in that direction. I think that's right. We also have to actually reinvest in, just like we have to reinvest in civic literacy, we have to reinvest in media literacy as a society. And by the way, that should also be the job of news agencies. I remember every time I would be on CNN in particular, which has unlike MSNBC, it has a history of reporting, right. Still has a great reporting team. I would inevitably get multiple tweets from people saying, "You are the most biased reporter I've ever seen." And I had to explain very nicely, but I'm not a reporter. And there's a difference, but we never explain to people, right? Oh, that person's a commentator, that person's a reporter. And now we put them on TV together sometimes. They're on a panel together. You've got a reporter and you've got a commentator. And those are not the same thing.
Isn't that up to each network, though? I mean, what you
do
described
about it. Explain to the people
what you described with Twitter is great. Yes, they're starting to flag things. You can't, they send you the reminder before you retweet something. You haven't read this article yet. Are you sure you want to retweet it? That's great. But that's up to the private organization. And the reason that people are moving to this Parler or to this Gab is specifically because those companies don't require that they read the article before they retweet it. And the reason in part that, I mean, CNN could do everything you're describing right now, and it would be phenomenal. But unless all of the news organizations said broadly and boldly, this is our opinion show and this is our news show, that wouldn't matter, would it?
Well, it is not. There's no silver bullet here, right? There is no silver bullet, and yes, maybe on some level the genie is out of the box, but I do think the genie can be constrained, right, by civic leaders, media leaders coming together and deciding to do what's best. So I think a number of strategies are paramount, right? There should be, when you post articles from certain certified news sites on Facebook, they should be, get a green check mark as opposed to other sources, right? I mean, there are specific things you can do, and they happen when people come together. And yes, government can play a role, the FCC and others, in encouraging, requiring this. We could go back to, some of the unraveling of deregulation that Reagan did, which contributed to this. So there are policy pieces to this too. The other thing I have to say is this also comes from this is not unrelated to, and certainly comes from the divestment in public education, right? The increasing gap in critical thinking skills, right? That is what happened. We're getting the country.
Wish we could force people to think critically.
Right-wing elite, yeah, but we're getting the country corporate right-wing elites wanted, right? They were happy to have
the free market
stupid
making
public,
the decision.
a stupid public, so they can be over here distracted by crazy theories while we're over here exploiting them and squeezing every dime out of people as we can. And so reinvesting in public education across the board, including in rural America, quality, and not just public education that treats people as widgets to be put into factories and to line rich people's pockets, but education that actually invests in people, as citizens, as thinkers, as creative thinkers, as critical thinkers. That's a long game, right? But long term, that is, the only way we ultimately solve this is when we have people who refuse to be suckered into the garbage, right? So it's all of those things. It's not one thing. I wish it were one thing. This is not an easy problem to solve.
This episode is sponsored by Apostrophe. It's a prescription skincare company for people that are ready to take their acne seriously. Prescription acne treatment really works, but it's hard to get. You got to get a prescription. You got to go to see a doctor. You got to sit in line at the pharmacy, all that stuff. That is until Apostrophe came along. Apostrophe really makes it easy to see a board-certified dermatologist online. And with this rise of all these interesting online companies, being able to get your skincare online is something that I think is really sort of genius, because if you've got acne, if you've got skin problems, being able to, sit in a doctor's office or having to sit in a doctor's office while you got zits all over your face, nobody wants to do that. So you can do this stuff from the privacy of your home, and they make it really easy to see a board-certified dermatologist. You get treated immediately, and your medications are delivered right to your house. So you don't have to go up to the pharmacist with zits all over your face and be like, please give me my medicine. All you do is you fill out Apostrophe's online questionnaire about your skin concerns, give them a little bit of medical history, snap a few selfies, which we all know everybody's good at doing nowadays, and the dermatologist gets back to you with a customized treatment plan tailored just for you. And the best part about it is Apostrophe actually offers not just the topical, but also the oral medications, which can treat you from the inside out. And that stuff really, really works. They treat acne, but they can also kind of help you with all your other skincare goals, like getting rid of redness. If you're like me, you got a lot of redness, wrinkles. Not that I have those, but maybe I do. They take care of all that stuff. You don't even need to schedule an appointment. And it even comes with a little cute postcard and stickers to personalize your prescription bottle, and you don't need to go to the pharmacy, like I said, during COVID. Medicine feels like it's working right away, and it has all the ingredients that work. Get $15 off your first visit with a board-certified dermatologist at apostrophe.com/heck and use our code HECK. This code is only available to y'all, to our listeners. To get started, just go to apostrophe.com/heck and click begin visit. Then use your code HECK at sign up, and you'll get $15 off your first dermatology visit. That's apostrophe.com/heck and use that code HECK to get your dermatology visit for $15 off. Or you can look for the link in our show notes, and we really thank Apostrophe for sponsoring the podcast. Okay, Katrina from LA asks, despite it all, 75 million people still voted for Trump. Will they be MAGA for life?
God, I hope not.
What do you think happens? I mean, do you think that, well, let me ask another question, just about impeachment in general, because we never really answered the whole idea about the compromise or whatnot. Do you think the Senate will convict Trump, or do you think that he's going to end up with a second acquittal?
I don't know. I actually don't know.
Because that would sort of answer Katrina's questions, right?
I've seen counts in either way. Oh, I don't think either way. And this notion of like, oh, well, we shouldn't have impeached Trump because it would appease. Like, his base can't be appeased. They certainly can't be appeased right now. By the way, I'm not sure he could if he tried. right? When you saw that, hostage video that he recorded the afternoon of the riots, that you then saw on, right-wing sites, his base turning against him. So again, and that goes back to that, yes, he's the instigator, but he's also just a symptom.
What
right? This is bigger than him.
What breaks their cult-like following for him? I mean, I can't help but think it's a stupid, self-centered analogy, but I can't help but think of some of my fans back in the day who just thought everything I shit gold, and I was like, nope, clearly I'm screwing things up, but they still, oh no, he has a reason. He has a reason. He's sending us secret messages through the what clothes he's wearing, and I'm like, y'all crazy. It's kind of like that with Trump. I mean, they read into which way he parts his hair as a message and a message to them. It is a cult, isn't it?
Oh, it's 100. I was going to go there myself. It is 100% a cult. And, I've talked to scholars and ex-cult people, and they describe this as very cult-like. And frankly, we're entering, this is sort of the, reality television entering politics in general, and the kind of cult of personality-ification of politics, right? And in general, the celebrityification of everything. Right now, our reporters are celebrities, and our politicians are celebrities, and everyone's a celebrity, and we're super fans, and we stan, and sort of all of that. Mm-hmm. And it definitely does not contribute to critical distance and critical thinking. Let's be clear on all sides. If you stan someone, they can do no wrong, is, I guess, how this works. And, what's interesting is to talk to the people who left the Trump cult. Because if you've ever talked to anyone who's ever left a cult, or people, ex-KKK people, or you name it.
You talked to some former KKKs in your book, right?
I did. And they become, you would think they'd be these sort of middle of the road, mushy people, right? Like who kind of still have some of those views, but kind of don't. But they actually become their own polar opposite. And it's fascinating to watch. Right. And you can see
That's
this with the people but watch this with, the Lincoln Project types even, and the people who were Trump supporters, Michael Cohen. Watch what's happening with Michael Cohen. Yeah. They become the most rabidly the opposite direction. And so there is a bit of then the question becomes, what makes the fever break?
That's the big one, yes.
In some cases, it's, we talked about McConnell. That's one scenario. We talked about, Michael Kohn. We could look at, that's another scenario. Those are fairly unique. The question about what makes that fever break for the majority of Trump supporters is one I think we will be discussing for the next, 10 to 20 years in our country. But I will say, here's my theory. I believe that what makes that fever break is when we implement full-throated, bold, good for everyone policies of education, economic opportunity, access to good housing and healthcare and clean air and clean water, and people can measurably see that their lives are better and connect it to that. When they see that the future they have been told to fear and the political leadership of the people they have been told to fear does not in fact threaten them, but actually makes their lives better. Well, I actually pray. I pray that contributes to breaking the fever.
I mean, you would have hoped that would have been the case when Johnson put Medicaid and Medicare into place, and they said that it was socialism, would kill everyone, and scared the hell out of Americans. And now people would not dare give up their Medicare. But you would also hope that would have worked when Obamacare came into being. And people now, we know, realize that Obamacare is something that they don't want to get rid of. And it's very, very, very popular now. But yet still people say Obama was a horrible president. I mean, there's so much rhetoric that keeps people from recognizing when something good happens in their life that they need to give credit to the person who gave it to them, right? I mean,
well, that's correct. And, let's not disentangle that from the previous conversation we were having about media, news, and information, right? So, the people who say, like, keep your socialist hands off my Medicare, like, what is, so there's certainly some squaring of that circle to be done in terms of people, again, getting accurate information, right? Cleaning up our public discourse. So at the very least, it is, it more heavily, if not ideally fully heavily skews toward fact. And away from disinformation and misinformation. So yes, I mean, obviously what I'm saying here relies heavily on, those two components, right? People, the people need to actually enact policies. We need to be able to get policies enacted. And, three pieces really. They need to actually help people, right? I mean, if they don't help people, then what's the point? That is the thing. And what is interesting is that at the end of the day, that is what Democrats aim to do, is help everyone live better, more prosperous lives. So, okay, let's deliver on those policies. Let's stop hedging our bets. Let's stop, feeling like we need to cozy up to Wall Street. Let's actually make the world better for the majority of people in this country. And then people need to connect that lived experience to those policies. They need to draw the connection between those two. And that is entirely about media, public information dissemination, social media, all of like that, how that narrative gets made clear, right? So I'm not like, again, I'm so sorry. I'm not saying it's easy. That's why I'm saying it's not going to happen anytime soon. But, it's like, that's, listen, there's a little version of this that we see with gay marriage, right? Because people were told that when you got gay marriage, the sky would fall. You wouldn't be allowed to be straight anymore.
And it would hurt your marriage. Your straight marriage would be ruined.
It would, right? And I think people, they heard all that. And I'm not saying there's not still a very vocal crowd of people out there saying that.
Right. And Sarah Palin said that Obamacare would give you death panels.
Right. But my point is most folks in the country right now, in a growing percentage, would say,
realize it didn't screw them up.
Yeah, it's good. It's fine. Because you did it. And, there's always this, in sort of movement circles and policy circles, you're always debating which comes first, kind of public opinion or policy. And we're always dancing between those two and trying to figure it out, right? But, sometimes you just make the change. And people see that either it didn't do the horrible thing they were told it would, or their lives actually got better. And there is nothing more powerful. And that ultimately, again, goes back to the point. People, maybe their politics or their views come off as vindictive or spiteful or resentful or fearful. Mostly they just want, a decent future for their children.
They don't want to have to think about the government either. They don't want to have to think about this stuff as much. They just want a better life. They want their life to be easier, is what you're saying.
And I think a lot of people's lives right now really, really suck. Sorry, what do you
Yes, they do.
Ahead.
Well, they sure do. I want to move on to our quick fire round. We take questions, more questions from our audience. You can send them in.
Sorry, I can just talk to you all night.
Well, thanks. I could talk to you. I mean, you were who I wanted to be on this week. I wanted to talk to you about this. But I do want to get some questions in from our listeners. We'll do a quick fire round from people who send in questions for Sally. If you have questions for our guests, you can send them in to our Instagram or Twitter at Politicon, or you can email them podcasts@politicon.com. Ian from I don't write these, so some of them I've read through, and I don't want to take credit for some of these. But I'm going to ask them anyway. Ian from Toronto actually asks, are Antifa and MAGA two sides of the same coin?
No. Is that how quick do you want my question?
That's perfectly quick for me. I mean, the reason I said I don't, because I don't think Antifa is not a organization. I don't believe.
I mean, it's a thing. I mean, I'm sure there are people. I get they're there, but it's never amassed any political power whatsoever. It has
they don't have hats.
It has no. I actually. Honest to God, I'm a certified card carrying lefty, and I've never met an Antifa. So
I don't know what it is either.
I'm going to go with.
I personally am anti-fascist. I'm not a supporter of fascism. That is for sure. So if that's what it means.
But anyway.
I mean, I've never even seen it written with a capital letter. By the way, I'm noticing even on my sheet here, it's not capitalized from Ian. So Ian, you don't even have it as a proper noun. It's not a group. Jonah from Brooklyn asks, would jobs and a return to normal put an end to the riots and the protests? I guess he's asking how much has coronavirus, how much has COVID exacerbated this situation?
No. I mean, it is, it became a convenient and politicized, frankly. And I mean, this is one of the great tragedies of, the Trump presidency, was his decision to politicize a deadly virus. And, what I think is really tragic is that ultimately it will do more harm to his supporters. And I think there will be a long tail of his, anti-mask messages and his rallies and so forth that will prove to be, viciously deadly more toward his side of the aisle. And that is wildly irresponsible on his part and just intensely tragic. Do I think, but for COVID, but for the shutdowns, but for the job losses, et cetera, no, I think, in fact, for example, we know that a lot of the people who came to riot were employed, they were staying in hotels, they were flying in airplanes. So, it becomes a, convenient excuse for people who, again, may or may not be materially suffering, but who certainly use the specter of the suffering of some to pinpoint blame. But let's be clear, this sort of, again, this white
when your support base has yachts and boat parades, they're not necessarily working class.
And this is like, for, again, 50 years of stoking white racial resentment and fear as a political strategy. It has just always found, new outlets. But it has been a consistent through line on the right of the Republican Party in good economic times and bad, sickness and health.
I'm going to do one more from the listeners, and then I have two or maybe three.
Okay.
More from my own brain. Miriam from Memphis asks, do you think our troops are more likely to be deployed under a Biden administration?
I hope not. I mean, I think the reality is that there are different kinds of Democrats. There are more hawkish Democrats and those who are far more reluctant.
Do we know? I mean, he chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee, but did he? That's the
thing, right? He is definitely he is more historically interventionist for sure. But I think he is surrounding himself with people who are, clear-eyed and cautious. Also,
and he's a diplomat, isn't he? I mean, he's more of a diplomatic.
He believes in diplomacy, yes. And I think he also, what Joe Biden's greatest gift is to be able to read the room. Right. He is a master politician in that particular sense. And I think he knows that our national appetite for violence, imperialism, war is at an all-time low. And either way, what I do think is true, again, especially because of his own personal history, that does give me some comfort and confidence, is that he would be intensely thoughtful and careful and reluctant to send anyone's children into war, as his own son did.
This episode is brought to you by Magic Spoon. It's a delicious cereal with 0 sugar, 11 grams of protein, and only 3 net carbs in each serving of either the cocoa, fruity, frosted, or blueberry flavors. So I'm doing keto. That was sort of a New Year's resolution thing for me. It's not that easy because all the fun breads and grains and all that stuff you can't really eat. And I love me some breads and grains, but Magic Spoon is cereal. Like, I can't eat normal cereal on keto, but I can totally eat Magic Spoon. Only 3 net carbs. You can still stay healthy, still enjoy your breakfast. It's perfect. It's keto friendly, gluten-free too, grain-free, soy-free, low carb, GMO-free. It's got all the good stuff. Go to magicspoon.com/heck to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code HECK at checkout to save $5 off your order. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product. It's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. That's some people who really know their stuff is good. A 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. That's magicspoon.com/heck and use the code HECK to save $5 off. I don't know who chose our code, but heck is what it is. We thank Magic Spoon for sponsoring How the Heck Are We Going to Get Along? He's an empath, if nothing else. I mean, he's definitely empathetic. That's sort of, I think, what drew so many people to him. And that's just my personal opinion. It's certainly what draws me to him. So my question then, what do you think he needs to do? I mean, if you ask me, I think he's got the brand that we need right now, which is, when he had his press conference, I guess last week, he talked about how as much as he disagrees with someone like Mitt Romney, as much as he ran against Mitt Romney in 2012, he sees him as a decent and honorable, and I think he used the word integrity to describe Mitt Romney. He's mentioned Mitch McConnell several times as a friend who he disagrees with. And he said straight up, we need a strong Republican Party in opposition. We need an opposition party. What does he need to do to fix and to heal the nation? He ran on a promise of bringing the nation together. How should he go about that?
I think, first of all, it is not only, perhaps even predominantly on him to heal the nation. Yes, obviously he'll be the leader, right? How he carries himself, the tone he sets matters. But let's be clear, Republicans broke it. They got to fix it. So
they got to fix their own party in order to fix it, though, right?
I mean, they have to be, and also acting with good faith. Showing their desire whenever they come around to, heal and make whole.
I mean, it could come down to whether they decide to stay Republicans. I mean, might not. I mean, I know we always talk about a third party being necessary, but to me, it feels like if it's going to happen in my lifetime, this might be the time that it actually happens, where Republicans,
What's clear is we need 10 parties. You know what I mean? This 2-party system.
Well, I'll sign on to that any day.
It just doesn't work. And to be honest, what I think, there's a danger in equating healing with compromise. And I think healing can come through accountability and truth and actually putting your nose to the grindstone, solving the problem that people need solving. Part of the problem, part of the whiplash, part of the sort of sense of sickness we all have from the last several years, and especially the last year, is having a president who is more interested in his own ego and his own stupid squabbles than actually doing the people's work. And so I actually, yes, his tone, yes, all of that, yes, but really, by just being a president who gives a damn, who wants to do the job well, and who wants to look at the problems we're facing and solve them, and that means the virus, that means the job losses.
That's a step.
But I mean, that is a big step forward. And again, it also, when the sky doesn't crumble, and in fact, they get to go back to work and the kids get to go back to school, you hope that a number of those folks who were so squirrely-eyed about Trump say like, oh, hey, actually, hang on. Functioning government that gives a damn about people. Oh, this is nice.
Right.
Okay.
So I usually, for the last question, ask a little kitschy, how the heck are we going to get along? Because since that's the name of the show and all. But I actually want to ask you instead, are you hopeful? Do you have hope that we will? Oh, God, that silence doesn't make me feel good, Sally.
I'm sorry. Well, I really want to think about your question, and I'm really trying to. I don't want to answer it, with some sort of pat answer. I'm really trying to think about whether I'm hopeful. Last week, Tuesday morning in through Wednesday night, on the heels of the Georgia Senate race, I felt so hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
I felt so hopeful that a state like Georgia, for all its history and all its complexities, as close as it was, and I wish it hadn't have been even that close, but still that we were moving in the right direction. And I don't mean Democrat versus Republican. I mean right versus wrong. That, that arc of history was even slowly, gradually bending toward justice. That gave me hope. That a Black man and a Jewish man could be elected senator from the southern state of Georgia, deep in the Confederacy. That gave me hope. And the fact that this white supremacist rebellion came on the heels of that moment does not to me feel like an accident. And I am trying to remember that for all the people who voted for Trump, for all the people who supported them, for all the people who participated in those riots and cheered them on, there are more Americans on the other side. And that we are growing. And that is, in fact, what is the greatest threat that is motivating those extremists. So their fantasies, their fears, their conspiracies are motivated by our reality. That in fact we are becoming a more perfect union, a more inclusive union, a more democratic union. That, when I can get myself there, when I can remember that, when I can hold on to that, that gives me hope. That gives me tremendous hope.
Damn, that was perfect. I don't want to even say any more. Sally Kohn. I know it's a little bit old, but I think it's good for people to go back and if you haven't read Sally's book from a few years ago, The Opposite of Hate, a field guide to
repairing our humanity.
Repairing our humanity. I knew it was a field guide.
Someday we'll do it.
It is. I think that I read it about a year and a half ago, and I think it is a perfect thing for people to go back and read now, because I hope, and after what you just said, I'm even more hopeful. Now the country's ready for it, for the guidebook. I really believe that, and I can't help but thank you. I can't thank you enough for being with us in this as the sun sets on a rough 4 years. I'm
rough 4
glad.
Years, rough 4 days, you name it, my friend.
Yes. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it.
It's really nice to get to talk to you and hear your voice. I miss you.
Likewise, you too. And we'll see. We'll all be together soon. We're all going to be able to get in person one day. I just feel it. It starts over on Wednesday. Reset. That's bring it on.
All right,
Thank you, Sally. Okay, thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.